Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Guild podcast, a podcast all about the experiences and memories that board games with friends and family can create. On today's episode, we will be discussing house rules. Do you do it? When do you do it? When do you not do it? When do you just toss the whole game out the window?
And if you didn't realize, Dan has been, practicing because he's supposed to be voice acting for a crime drama.
Oh man, I walked into the room and there was a game with pieces littered all over the floor, and it was dead. Oh, it was a crime in progress. I needed to investigate it, but house rules might have fixed it. Might have.
House rules, guys.
Did you ever put a house rule in where you thought that it fixed the game? So do you guys have an example of a game? I do, but do you guys have an example of a game where you did a slight tweak and you think that the game is better because of it?
Wait. You mean you're all not lawful good and you follow the rules?
Oh, I'm 100% chaotic evil.
Chaotic evil. You don't follow the rules to do 100%. I know this isn't true because James, when he plays when you play Legacy Edition games, James, do you tear up your pieces and throw them away?
Oh.
Oh.
I can't do that. That's not right.
So he's totally chaotic until he's being told to be chaotic and he can't do it.
Yeah, nope. I can't do it. Also, it's not my fault. Tabletop Simulator sucks. I can't pick up a single card. I have to pick up the entire deck. I end up putting it in my hand for some unknown reason, so I have the entire deck in my hand instead of one card.
So
Tabletop
all my legacy
Simulator.
games have a bag of destroyed cards.
Oh yeah, my Gloomhaven has a bag of discard cards. They're called discard even. I won't. No.
I tear them up, throw them away, chew them up, swallow them whole.
You're a horrible person.
All right, so house rules. Who has them?
Okay.
Well, I could start off with a really easy one.
Yeah.
Everyone, Terraforming Mars is almost built to put house rules in. There's variable different ways that you can play the game. And there's even in the base rules, there's different rules you can pick and choose on how you start the game. Now, when you do the corporate mode, you're not supposed to do the player gets every one of every resource, but it says you can. So that's one thing we do is to reduce the time for Terraforming Mars. We give a person a bonus resource of every type. And then if you get a card that says you get one more, you just add to that. So you might get 2 titanium production on the first round instead of 0. It helps speed up the game. It helps your second turn be a little bit better because you actually have some resources going in. We found that if you didn't have that, it took 3 or 4 rounds before you really get going. So that's an example of a house rule where we just implemented the base rule and kept it for the corporate version where you have the more aggressive cards and you can use the corporations and stuff instead of that baseline corporation, which I think is 10 cards. The other thing we do is you don't have to have people pay for the first 10 cards, and we don't. And we also don't draft the first 10, which you also don't have to do. But if you use the corporate rules verbatim and you go up to that, you're supposed to pay for your 10 cards and you're also supposed to draft them. We found that the game takes a long time and drafting the cards takes even longer. And not having those bonuses at the beginning really drags out the game. Thankfully for Prelude, it also helps where you get more bonus stuff. But even with all that, with keeping your first 10 cards, with having all your production set to 1 and having the Prelude card, the game still takes forever, but it's an awesome game. That's one of my examples of house rules.
I personally like the drafting, but I can see with your normal game group not wanting to do the drafting because it can it can lengthen the game. You do have to have players that are able to make snappy decisions and know the game very well, or just are making decisions based on gut instinct to be able to make that go relatively fast.
Yeah, I would like to play a game where everyone wants to draft, but in general, I've found that at least most of the people I've been playing with don't want to draft, so we just don't.
Yeah, as long as we're talking about Terraforming Mars, I also play it in a different way that James plays it. So that just goes to show you, when we play it, we usually play with corpse and we usually don't draft. We never have drafted beginning cards, but we do have to pay for the cards that we want to keep out of our opening 10 with our starting funds. That I think is important. And because we have also played mixed games where some people get normal corp cards and other people get beginner corp cards. The people with beginner corp cards get 10 cards and get them for free, which is part of the bonus because they don't have those special powers the normal corp cards give them.
Oh yeah, we don't mix those. So, but yeah, The beginning corp cards, you don't ever pay for the top 10 cards. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, it just everybody I ever talked to plays Terraform Mars differently, but it's because you can. It
Right.
doesn't
Most of that
strictly
stuff
say-
is most of that stuff is in the rule book. So I'm not sure if we want to call that necessarily a house rule. It's just sort of like, here's a couple different ways you could play.
Yeah, I'm sort of easing it in because that one's sort of like, we like this way, we play it this way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could see where you wouldn't include them as house rules because they're literal rules that you just pick. Which one
It's like a game that might have different modes, right?
Yeah.
Like say a game has different modes based on whether or not you play it like solo, co-op, semi-competitive, or competitive, for example. Those are different enough that they're going to require different rules out of the rule book itself.
So I have a game that wasn't really house ruled. We learned the game wrong. I think it was James's fault. And we were playing it that way for years before we realized the rule was wrong, and we just kept playing it that way. That's Settlers of Catan. So when we learned the game, we learned it that you get the resources for both your starting villages, not just the last one. And that's how we've always played it. And then when we learned the rule was wrong, we tried it the other way and realized it was a longer game that way. There was a couple things that we felt like worked better and things that didn't work as well. One, you do have a nice, really head start. If you plan well, that initial decision can be super important. And you could actually, in your first turn, build a road and a settlement, or upgrade to a city by doing that. So the only thing is that faster game also means there is a little bit more potential for a runaway leader.
Yeah, but I'm with you. I mean, anything I think that can get that game started up a little bit quicker, I think is kind of actually good, because it definitely makes for a longer game when you don't have all those resources. Because I mean, that's the only way I've ever played it, is the way that the rules say. So I'm hearing you explain it that I'm like, man, gosh, that would get the game started off so much faster to have those extra resources at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree that getting it for both is amazingly better. Also, in the rules, before your first turn, you don't lose your resources also helps.
Oh, the robber can hit you on your first turn before your first turn. Yeah.
So having that 6 potential cards, and you're the last player, if that rule wasn't around, you could lose half your cards by the time it got to your turn. But I do think that's a really cool rule, just to add those resources in.
Ideally, I always go for brick, wood, sheep, grain, which is just enough to build a road and a settlement.
Yeah, for the record, I too have played Settlers of Catan many times, and I can't remember a time that I have played it where we haven't started with all the resources from both of your starting villages.
Yep.
Only when playing by the rules.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you read the rules, you're like, what the heck have I been doing? It's like the same thing when you play Monopoly for the 14th time. You're like, wait, what?
Yep.
Because there's so many rules you've ever used. Like free parking isn't real.
As long as we're on the topic of playing games with hot rolls unintentionally by misreading the rule book.
Right.
Let me tell my epic story about Lewis and Clark, the Expedition, I think it's called. This is the game that's like a race game where you're trying to get your camp token past the last space on this like track, and it uses an element of like deck building where you have a hand of cards. You don't really have a deck, but like you play a card and then you play another card with it to determine its strength, which is like how many times you perform this action. The various actions are like gathering resources or converting resources into movement points so you can move your scout. Eventually you have to perform the camp action, where your scout moves maybe back a couple steps based on the time penalty that you're currently taking, and then your camp moves up to where your scout is. But we have played this game some number of times. I don't even know how many, probably more than a dozen. And at some point in time, we realized we were playing it wrong. So like at the 7th or 8th or 9th play of this game, we realized that we had got something wrong with the camp movement rules, and we had been playing it wrong since the beginning. We tried to fix that for our next play, and then we're like, oh wait, we forgot this small thing this play, so we still didn't play it right. And then like the next 2 plays, we're like, wait a second, this other small thing we forgot about this time. So we got it wrong a couple more times. And this kept happening until I actually got rid of the game in frustration. And this is not a complicated game. We just had the worst luck with it.
Yeah, this is a game I hate, even though I've never played it, simply because of the name. I cannot get this. Every time I try to get this game, I get the wrong game. There's too many games called Lewis and Clark.
There's literally hundreds.
And I just gave up on ever trying to buy it again.
So I'll throw out another one, which is one of my favorite games, Eminent Domain. Eminent Domain, with all the expansions and stuff, especially with higher player counts, we actually instituted a lot of house rules for that game. We used to play that like constantly at our lunches. So Eminent Domain is like Puerto Rico. We're going to select a role, and then everyone can follow or dissent it. And there's different things you can do throughout the game. Like you can colonize, you can research, you can war, you can trade. So there's commerce, but a couple of the weaker actions in the game are trade, and war is semi-strong. But one of the expansions introduced a tech card that is a permanent card. So most of the time when you buy tech cards, they go into your deck, they get shuffled in, and you draw them out. Well, each of the planet types had a tech card available that was a permanent that said, if you dissent war, you get a victory point. Well, what ends up happening is, through no fault of my own, because I'm evil and they just have to live with it, there's variable player powers that you can get, and one of them helps you out with that. You can get a free tech for doing different things. It's just card, you get a 3 planet tech without having, or 3 light bulb tech without having to have the 3 light bulbs. You just get the tech. So I'd have that card, or I would get the card if no one else had it from the tech decks, and I would get the permanent card for dissenting war, and I would get all 5 of them. So that means that every time someone tried to do the war action, I would get 5 points. And the problem with that is you only have a limited amount of victory points that you're allowed to get before the game ends. So what'll end up happening is, while I'm passively getting points, I'm just colonized, getting planets and getting points, and the game will end very, very quickly for Eminent Domain, because we'll run out of the normal victory point pool, which is normally harder, because doing the consume action where you produce and then consume, those victory points take 2 hits of that roll to get, and it's not as easy to follow too, and it clogs up your deck, so your victory points don't move as fast. But if you do that route, especially if you get it through turn 1, you get 1 of them, and then you keep going and keep getting them, and they don't clog up your deck because they're permanents, it's very hard to beat that dumb strategy. So that was one of the first cards we actually banned from Eminent Domain. They were completely removed and not allowed.
So there's I've been thinking I probably should put a house rule in for Everdell.
No putting the skunk on your 15th building?
No, just like have a betrayal mechanic, because for whenever I play with you, I need something to protect me against betrayal.
There's just some games I like to break it. Eminent Domain is one of my favorite, and I love to like exploit just a strategy, and I keep doing it until someone can come close to me, and then I shift it a little bit and try to make it better and improve it. But that was one, and the other card that got banned was one that lets you take like 3. Like normally you can do 1 roll per turn. So you play a card and you get the bottom action. Like you'll get a fighter, or you can put the card underneath a planet to colonize it. You have to have so much on each planet, and then you can take a roll. But there's one that lets you take 2 rolls, and that one didn't get banned out of the deck, but it got the asymmetric player power that you can get for it did get banned, because it turns out if you gear your deck to techs like I do, like you try to get the tech planets and just go nuts, that being able to do 2 actions or 2 rolls is really bad. But that was it. I mean, all in all, Eminent Domain is an awesome game. I love it. I love to exploit it. I bet you if someone was willing, they'd probably find a strategy against the war dissenting, like just don't do war. But the problem is if everyone's colonizing, it just makes the game rougher. It's nice to break out of your high player count into something else. And a lot of the other options don't work very well. But there's also the asteroid strategy where you can get free techs and stuff for flipping the asteroids. The asteroids let you flip them over for just discarding your hand. And that's a really hard strategy to get going. But once it does, it's really, really fast. And that's one that can beat me, but it's not consistent. And a lot of times I will be the evil person and get the pieces away that they need. I'll just get the tech and I don't need it. I can't use it, but they could have. So now, therefore, the rest of their game is very sad because they have a whole bunch of 0-point asteroids.
Before we dig too much deeper, I think I want to go on record by saying, for the most part, I haven't house rolled very many like board games. Most of the board games I have in my collection, I try to play rules as written, with exceptions that, of course, will probably come up later in the episode. However, I do remember doing a lot of ad hoc stuff at the role-playing game table. And I think that's a lot more common. Something happens in game and you're like, oh man, I don't know how falling damage works, or I don't know how to run a siege. I know that's somewhere in this book over here, but I don't have time to look this up right now. So we're just gonna make something up and roll with it. And maybe I'll look up the actual rules and we'll change to what we're supposed to do next session, right?
Yeah, this happens all the time, playing D&D and other role-playing games. I know that my group, my home group for quite a long time, we were playing things, just like you said, just random things that just seemed like, oh no, we either that's the way we thought it worked, or most of the time it was, we don't know. As the person who's usually running the game, I don't want to slow down the fun we're having at the table, the adventure that we're having, to crack open a book and spend 20 minutes looking up a rule. So as long as the group as a whole can agree that, hey, this is what we're going to do for now, and then after the session, I'll look it up. And like you said, maybe we look it up and we don't even like what we find and we decide to go with what we had already decided. I know there was one, it was something like, there was one that I was doing and it might have even been like you save on a saving throw. Most of the time you're supposed to take half damage. And I think I had like somehow missed it on this one spell that you were supposed to take half damage. So nobody was taking any damage. And so we went ahead and just kept going with that. It might have been like Fireball or something like that. So if we had all of a sudden halfway through the campaign started playing it the way that it was supposed to be played, then the whole like combat style of this party would have had to change, because they were constantly dropping fireballs on top of each other with the hope that they would save, and if they saved they would take no damage, when really they should have been taking half damage every single time they saved. And rather than make them all of a sudden change the whole way they had learned to fight combat, I was like, no, the rest of this campaign we'll keep it the same, but if I ever run for you guys again, we're doing it the other way. Because as the person who runs, I'm like, yeah, that would make it more dramatic. It's a more dramatic choice, knowing that even if they do save, you're still hurting your own players. I think is a bit more dramatic, and so I wish I had done it the proper way. And I can't remember if it was Fireball or not, but it was something very similar to that. But like Dan said, a lot of time it's just you're sitting down there. Somebody asks, can I do this thing? And you know that they've probably thought of a rule for it. But Dan, is there something at the RPG table that like you remember it being a rule that you house ruled and you stuck with it because you liked it better than what the rules were as written? Or because I know there's a bunch out there. RPGs they are the game made for house rules.
Absolutely. I can't think of any specific examples. I remember a situation where a player wanted to go to a shop and they wanted to get arrows tailor-made. So they wanted these arrows to have specific colors on them because they wanted them to be like their trademark, right? And I was like, all right. The shopkeeper gives you a quote. I will let you know what that quote is next session. And then I just moved on from there, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like the cost of items, the cost of magic items comes up a lot, and it's not an easy thing to always look up right away. One that I think comes up a ton, and I've seen it on Twitter, I've seen it on D&D live, like live action recordings. But I think the one that comes up a bunch is the fact that in rules as written in 5th edition, to drink a healing potion costs an entire action. And everyone's like, but I want to still swing my sword on this turn. And it's just, like you can see me, I can drink water out of a cup really fast. And so I know like a lot of people have taken to drinking a healing potion as a bonus action. And so you still have your main action that you can do something with, but you can drink your healing potion as a bonus action. And so it doesn't seem like it takes up as much, but obviously you only get one bonus action per turn. So that can stop you from doing a whole host of other things on your turn. But still, that one that comes up a lot. I feel like, but there's so many different ways to get healed in 5th edition. I'm like, you know what? It takes an action. If you're going to heal yourself right now, it takes an action. Get over it.
Yeah. So you'd be like, okay, well, if you can drink your entire full glass of water in 3 seconds,
right,
while swinging a bat, let's just have you swing that around. Let's see how that works out for you.
No, I like that. That's a really good analogy. Your action takes you 6 seconds every round in D&D. Yeah. Can you drink a glass of water in 6 seconds and try to decapitate a guy?
Yeah. Let's see you do that. How about you just have to hang back for a second and drink your potion and shut up? No,
I like it. I like it, everybody. It's done. Drinking a potion is an action. James has declared it so. And I think with a very good analogy.
And I think that D&D is, and all RPGs are different in that regard, and that most of them do actively encourage that you're supposed to change the game to fit what you're trying to do. And in many ways, RPGs are less of a game and more of a structure to create your own game.
D&D is nothing but a big house rule.
Yeah, pretty much. I almost said D&D is not a game, and that
and there's always
some people,
right? there's always new things getting added to the game. They get layered on. I mean, there's new books coming out constantly. So I think that's part of the fun. I think it's a game. It's a game that makes designers. It is a game that creates people who want to continue to create for this game that they enjoy. And you're not hemmed in as much as I feel like as you are with a board game that comes with a set board, set pieces, set commodities. I feel like it's a little bit tougher. Obviously, though, you can still house rule board games. I feel like because of the broad scope of an RPG, it's just so much easier to do that, to house rule it and to change the game. So
I have a good house rule for a Cosmic Encounter. So for Cosmic Encounter, if you see it set up there, you need to put it away and play a different game.
Hey. But speaking of Cosmic Encounter, I do house
play
rule
Dune
that
instead.
too.
It's better.
I generally do not house rule. Generally, I feel if you have to house rule, you should just get a better game. But, there's little things where it's like, okay, this is nothing that's wrong with the game. This is just something I tend to prefer because I play a certain way. For Cosmic, the only thing I do as far as different from the actual written rules is the filch. Now, the copy I have comes with two versions of the filch, the classic and the newer version of the filch. And it says only use one of them. I use both because they're just fun. The filch is basically a power that allows you to cheat. And normally I'm very much against cheating. There's something about that filch where it is actually a really fun way of cheating where the game is, because the game is kind of endorsing it, and it's led to a lot of interesting stories about how people have snuck cards and cheated in interesting ways. It's like getting up from the table to supposedly get a drink and then coming around and just grabbing a bunch of cards and going back to their seat, and it's like nobody even notices, like really obvious things that should have been caught, and it's just exciting talking about them afterwards.
I make fun of Cosmic Encounter, but Cosmic Encounter is a great game with the right group. The problem is it has to have the right group to play it, and the right mindset going into the game too.
And it's also one of those games that a lot of people do house rule in that because there are certain combinations of aliens that work better than others, and there's certain aliens that don't fit with a group's play style. So a lot of people do kind of pick and choose the aliens that you can put in. But considering there's like hundreds, literally, of aliens, if you have all the expansions, it's not a big deal to take out one or two here and there.
I got a house rule that actually comes up occasionally, and we've employed it. I've employed it a couple times at lunch hour games and stuff, is a timer. One of the games we used to have a timer for was Settlers of Catan for trading. And we literally set a 5-minute timer. And if you went past 5 minutes, your turn's over, like done.
Wow, I couldn't imagine a turn taking 5 minutes in that.
I know, that's why we had to put it in, because it's like 20 minutes later, I have to wake up from my nap. But we also had it for a couple other games. We had it for Ethnos. We had it for Ethnos. We had a timer for Ethnos for one of the players because just taking way too long. I mean, like 10 minutes for their turn. No.
I can guess which player that is. Well, I won't name him.
But yeah. So have you guys ever had to employ a timer, or has the group's been pretty good with keeping on pace? Or have you been like, well, let's just try to speed this up?
I have never had to use a timer. Once or twice while someone was taking seemingly a long time with their turn, I've started humming the Jeopardy theme that usually does it.
It's classic.
That's classic. One thing that I have implemented is basically out of order sequencing. And this is when you perform a series of actions in the wrong order, but you get the same result as if you had performed them in the right order, because some games have certain orders of what they do in terms of action resolution or the phase order of the turn or what have you.
Yeah, we do a lot of sort of version of that where for the longer games where you have long turns. I think we did it on Agricole quite a bit. It's like once you get to a certain point of your turn, the next person can start. You're not done your turn, but you have nothing left that would affect the next player. So yeah, that's one way of speeding up games. If it's if you have a game where, especially if you have a game where market action is the last thing you do at your turn, and it's like, okay, you can the next player can do everything that doesn't apply to that market.
Have you ever employed a house rule and you regretted it? I have. It was with Power Grid. So in Power Grid, the money you have is hidden. You're not supposed to know. And one of the people playing it said that we should try a game with it known. And was that awful? Because it's never fun to know mathematically that you're not going to win a game 3/4 of the way through. It's much better to not know and not be able to math it out to determine that you're just no chance for you to win. Power Grid is definitely a math heavy, now it's just addition and subtraction, but it's in multiplication, but it's a math heavy game where you have to think about how you're spending your money properly, how you're going to bid properly for these plants, how you're going to fire these plants, how much money you're putting in, how much money do you have for the fuel to power these plants, what order you need to be in. Do you need to tank yourself a little bit so you get to the market first for these fuels? There's a lot of things in Power Grid and they're all straightforward. You know there's some fuzziness with the bidding, but you know what you need to do. You know if you need to diversify, you know how much it costs to do these connections, you know how much everything you have is. And the one thing that you don't know from the players is how much money they have. And knowing how much money they have hurts the game on multiple levels. It also will tell you whether you can or cannot win 3/4 into the game, but it'll tell you how to strong arm the other players for the fuels and stuff, which is also not fun. It's not fun for me knowing that Nathan has $3 left and all I have to do is buy all the oil and Nathan is screwed because that's what he had. So that was a mistake of employing a house rule on a game that was better designed by leaving that hidden. Did any of you guys employ a house rule and then just regret it?
There's been a few engine buildings games where I can't think of a specific one. I was thinking about kind of trying it out for innovation, but the idea of like prolonging the point where the end game ends to kind of get your engine up. And the games are designed to end where they end because it kind of devolves and it gets ridiculous and the maintenance often becomes too much once you get your engine completely going. But I do like to see that finished engine and see, like, in an innovation, what happens is you got like the 10 ages, and most of the time you don't get past age 6 or 7, and you've ended the game, at least with the 3-player count. And, I always want to see those 10 point, the age 10 cards because they're cool. I'm worried that if I do that house rule and maybe make it so you have to get enough more achievements before the game ends so we can see those level 10 cards, it's just going to be kind of a nonsense game at that point.
Yeah, especially with engine building games in general, they tend to have a snowball effect. So if you increase like the threshold of the game end by, X number of points, like if you double the end game requirement for the game, just as an example, it's not going to take twice as long. It's going to take like 20 to 30% longer because your engine is ramped up and you're moving that many more steps in one turn. I mean, this will vary depending upon the exact game that we were talking about. But, I've also had that feeling where I've played an engine builder and I've been like, man, this was kind of cool. But I feel like I only really started going in the last like 2 rounds, and I would have liked like one more round to really get going.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was going to throw out there too is Stonemaier Games is a good example of where house rules make it into the actual game or adjustments make it into the actual game. One example right off the bat is Tapestry. And Tapestry, there is a errata for each of the variables that you can use for each of the different factions, or were they not factions, civs, and for different starting resources or lack of starting resources or different starting things to balance them out better. And that was beyond the first game. It came out as a PDF on their website after the game released, and it was later on fully printed and released with their expansion for the board game. So that's one example. Another example is Wingspan. And Wingspan, a couple of things that made it difficult is the options that you had in the bird feeder. So with I think it's the Oceania expansion, gives you the ability to reset that. It also gives you the ability to reset the array of birds that are available to select from, because those blind draws make it difficult for the game.
Right.
So they're just tiny tweaks. Tiny tweaks just make the game better. So I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing the Oceania one came from some sort of house rule at one point or another that looked like the game made it better, or it could have just been straight from the designer. I don't know.
I was gonna say, but I think you're right though. It's in the world that we live in today where people can speak kind of directly to the people who design the games they're playing more easily nowadays. It's easier for those issues in the games that players find to come to light. And I think it's a really great thing that a lot of creators out there are, at least seem to be interested in hearing back from those people. And it's, I mean, because again, as much as you play test a game, you might be play testing a game with dozens, maybe 100. I honestly don't know, play testing like dozens of people, I would assume, play test games before they get finally designed and put out there. And then all of a sudden, thousands of people buy the game. And so I think if you're a designer out there, if you're a game production company, you know, I would think you would want to continue to hear back from the people who are playing the game, who at least are sincerely responding about the game and not just giving you a hard time about the things that they don't like. But if they're being honest about how they felt about the game, what they think could make the game better, and being open to putting out expansions or alternate editions of the game with those issues fixed, then I mean, I think that's fantastic. So, you know, house rules, in that mindset, house rules could one day become the rules, because design doesn't end just because the game has hit your table. I think design is open, and because it's at your table, just because the rules say one thing doesn't mean you can't make it your own.
That was one of the things that I heard was a big challenge for the Dune game, not Dune Imperium, but the area control game, where in the original Dune, there were so many house rules that people have come up with. It was actually getting to the point where it was hard to tell the house rules from the real rules for a lot of people. And they were just trying to, a lot of the design for the new version of the game was just trying to figure out how to which rules to incorporate and which ones to drop, and what, you know, how to best do that, and whether to include like optional variant rules or not.
I'd say another example is Scythe. Scythe actually had a change in the rules when I think it's Invaders from Afar, potentially, or maybe Wind Gambit, one of the two. But they found that a faction pairing with the player mat, one of the player mats, and two factions and two of the different player mats was completely unbalanced. So they're actually banned. And if you play the digital version, it's defaulted to prevent those, but you can uncheck it to allow them if you really want. And also, which was in Invaders of Afar, they came with a little cardboard piece to cover over one of the factions' player power, to adjust it for the high player counts if you play with the higher player counts. So there was a couple of rules adjustments with that. And I've seen multiple games that once you get the expansion, they have a replacement card for the base game sort of thing. That's pretty frequent.
I have another example in the same vein, actually. Mine's a good story, you know. There's this game called Among the Stars. It's a cool like card drafting game where you're building a space station. Okay. The game came out with with a two-player variant rule where players were effectively playing two ghost hands. The community, I forget the name of the BGG user, but someone came up with alternate two-player rules. And those rules were actually put into the second edition version of the rule book for the game. And they credited him by his BGG username in the rule book.
See, that's really cool.
I need to get New Dawn to the table with you, Dan. Have you played that? It's in the same universe as Among the Stars. I vastly prefer it.
Not just a little bit. Vastly.
It's space, so it has to be vast.
Vast.
So in preparation for talking with you guys about house rules, you know, I did some just digging around online at some of the house rules that people were saying, like, this is the best thing, you should do this for your game. Obviously there was a ton out there, again, like Dana and I were talking about just a little bit ago with RPGs, and one for that I thought would be interesting to make your critical hits in Dungeons and Dragons seem just a little bit more epic. Right now, you know, if you roll a d20 during combat, you get to roll the dice that you would normally roll for your damage twice. So you roll it once, you add your bonus, and then you roll it again. Well, some people are saying you would treat that first roll, instead of making a roll, just you do max damage. And then you do make an actual roll then after that for additional damage to your critical roll. I think that's kind of cool. That way, you know for sure that you're at least getting one of those air quotes rolls max damage. So, because just because you roll twice doesn't mean you're going to roll well twice. So that kind of like reinforces that you did do a really good job by critically hitting and rolling that d20, rolling the 20 on your d20. That was one in like the RPG realm that I thought, oh, you know, I would not hate adding something like that to my game. again, making the players feel a little bit more epic. That is the goal of the combat in the game, is making the players feel pretty cool about themselves and their characters. So that was something I saw in the realm of RPGs. But in the realm of board games that I have played that I really enjoy, one that I thought made a lot of sense was for Seven Wonders Duel. So I really enjoy Seven Wonders Duel. I think it's a fantastic 2-player game. There's a lot going for it. But one of the things that I hadn't really thought about it much is that the game is played over 3 ages, and in between age 1 and 2 and in between age 2 and 3, the player who has the smallest military, so on the military track of the game, you have the weakest military, gets to decide who goes first in the next age. So if you're losing on the military track going into age 2, you can decide, well, I want to go first, or I want you to go first. That's usually dependent on what cards are available and kind of if you're thinking strategically what you want. But someone said, just a very small twist on the game is the person with the strongest military gets to make that decision instead of the person with the weakest military, which kind of makes sense. If you've got the stronger military, you would think that you're in a better position to carry on through to the next age rather than the person with the weakest military. I think that kind of makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about it that way before. And then the other reason they said that they do this is not just that because they think it thematically it makes sense, but because also they do it because they think that there's not enough incentive for people to take the military route in that game. There's multiple ways to win the game. You can try to go the science route. You can just try to go the regular victory points route. And military is kind of a slightly tougher route to take. And so they don't think there's enough incentive there. And if you incentivize it by saying, if you do have the stronger military, you get to make that decision in between ages 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, they all of a sudden you're incentivizing a third aspect of the game that usually can sometimes get overlooked. So having read that, I thought that I actually really like that. I don't think it's like an astronomical difference probably to the game, like to the outcome maybe, but I think it's kind of a cool thematic reason to maybe make that change. So probably at some point in the near future playing that game, I might make that change and see how it actually plays out. So I don't know about you guys, but did you guys do any other like look online for rules that people have put out there and maybe they've changed your mind about a game?
So I got one, and it's for my favorite game, Blood Rage.
I'm all
designed
ears.
by
I'm all
Eric
ears.
M. Lang.
Yeah. Eric Lang. I like
Lang.
that guy.
First mention. So in the game, per the rules, when you draft, you always draft left every age. But as a house rule, and this one's one on BGG, you can age 1, you can go left, age 2, you go right, age 3, you go left, which is generally how I play the game because I like that a lot. But it is a house rule.
But I kind of like it because that means that I don't have to give you cards at least one of those rounds probably.
Switches it up a little bit.
Right.
So it's nice. Now, the original reason for that rule was that your turn is clockwise. So you protect yourself from the person on your left when you draft because you will go before them. So you have a general idea what the person on your left has. But I do like shifting the draft.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. Like if you're always protecting from that one way, then you can feel pretty confident.
Yeah.
But also if you got to mix it up, it's going to make it maybe slightly more difficult to know what's happening and what's coming down the pike, which I think would be kind of fun, actually.
Yeah. So I like that rule. And that's one Nathan and I use most is the reverse drafting.
Okay.
The second one that I've never used before, but I think it's a really cool idea, especially if you're going to play with a full player count in Blood Rage. So in the full player count in Blood Rage, not everyone's going to go first. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
Only the first 3 people will go first. So this variant says with the high player counts, what you do is the person with the lowest glory at the end of the age is the first player.
Oh, okay.
Which I've never tried. And I think that's a cool idea.
So, I mean, did they give a reason as to why the person with the lowest glory, not the highest glory?
In Blood Rage it's sort of like a catch-up mechanic. It's basically what it is someone's doing really well, obviously, if they have a high glory and someone has lower glory. So it gives the person with a lower glory a slight advantage in the next round instead of just being seating arrangement sort of thing. The other variant was the person to the left of the person that played last in an age goes first the next age. So if you ended the age, then the person to your left would be the person that starts the next age.
Okay.
So just keep going clockwise.
Yeah.
So those were 2 variants for selecting first player.
And you've never played with either of those?
No, I read it today and I thought, well, you know what? The next game of Blood Rage, I want to try one of them and see what it works out.
I think I like the glory, the person with the lowest glory.
Yeah, I
think
sort
would
of
be
like the person
interesting.
with the lowest glory. I think that's the one I'm going to end up using and try because
Okay, just tell me when you're ready to play again, and I'll be over.
I like that, but I worry about it a little bit because it can be a little deceptive in that the person with the lowest glory isn't necessarily the one furthest behind because they might be just having a longer term strategy. They may be going for, getting their, if they got all their stats up, they may be getting a lot of their points from there. So they're not necessarily the one that technically has the lowest glory.
it could be, but
Yeah,
I think it's better than clockwise first.
Yeah.
If you have
Yeah.
large player, if you have a 3-player game, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
Well,
If
right.
it's
Everyone's
4 or
going to get their
5,
chance.
They should probably go one of the other ones. I sort of really like the idea of like just keep going in a circle. Like whoever ended the last age is the person after them is the person that gets to start the next one. That one's fine too.
It makes a lot more sense in higher player count. So 3-player count, you want to rotate because there's a big advantage in going first.
Yeah.
And in a 3-player game, everybody gets to go first. At some
So
point.
it's nice.
Right.
Nice
Again,
and
this
even
is
at that
just
point.
higher player count. Only.
Yeah, higher player count.
Higher player counts, you might not get a chance to go first. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So that was on the third one was when using the Gods expansion, which I do not like the Gods expansion at all. So I don't know. I could try this one to see if I like it better. But you blind pick the first 2 gods normally. So those are the gods that are going to be in the game. During the second age, remove the gods from the board and their cards and blind pick again. And third age wipes the last 2 gods and those 2 come out. So like that'll get all the gods out on the game. I'm willing to try that one. I really don't like the gods expansion.
I'm meh on the Gods expansion. Yeah. It changes the game a little bit in that but then it doesn't. It adds a little extra mechanic that doesn't really do a whole lot.
Just in one area. And you're like, it's just like having a monster that does that. It just happens to be there. Only they just stick around. I don't know. I was not a fan of it. I don't think even with that option, I'll be a fan of it. And it's the one we played when you came over, Peter, we played with everything but it.
Right. Yeah. No, because and again, it threw me because I've mostly only played digital and I've only played the with the base rules, but we added the mystics, but we didn't add the gods because I know that you guys, it's not your favorite. So
yeah, I didn't add the gods. I can if you want. I'm fine playing that way. I just don't like it.
I'd like to play it at least once just to see for myself what it feels like. But again, Blood Rage is one of those games like I love the base game. I don't really need to mess with it a whole lot. I did enjoy getting to see some of the other other monsters and kind of what they do though.
I'm with you though. The base game's perfectly fine.
Yeah, so
I feel like we should just stop this recording right now and just go play Blood Rage instead.
All right, sign me up.
All right, folks, we're back from playing Blood Rage, and
Peter finally won. Peter won.
Peter won.
Peter won. I want to talk about a favorite game of mine that I have house ruled consistently and in more than one area of the game, I guess. So it happens to be Fortune and Glory, the Indiana Jones in a box game. One of the house rules that I always use is to not roll for movement. This is something that's been officially adopted by the community. Rules as written, you roll once to determine initiative. High roll gets the initiative token. Anybody who rolled a 1 gets an event card. And then you also roll to determine how many spaces you can move on your turn. And then again, on this second roll, a 1 results in the people who rolled a 1 to get an event draw. The house rule that's been adopted by the wider community is you roll just once for initiative. A 1 or 2 generates an event draw. And then everyone gets a flat 4 points of movement, right? The other thing that I have modified for my game, actually there's 3 things total, but we won't get into the third thing because it's too complex. The other thing that I've modified is how villains work in the game. Rules as written, when an injured villain goes back to HQ for any reason, that could be because they successfully recovered an artifact or a player has stolen the artifact from underneath them. Whenever they return to HQ, they fully heal. I feel like this makes the villains not like you're de-incentivized to attack or otherwise interact with the villain tokens. So I usually play it that if they come back to base with the artifact, when they do that, they're immediately deployed in the following turn. So if they're immediately deployed in the following turn, they do not fully heal. If they go back without the artifact, this is called being delayed. They spend a full turn going from delayed to ready status in the HQ, and at that point they fully heal. And the other case where they could go back to HQ is if the player character KOs them, in which case, of course, they fully heal before they return to the map. So
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So do you think Zaya Legends of the Drift system would be made better by going to a point system for movement instead of rolling?
I don't think No.
Okay.
Yeah.
You like the? I haven't. Well, to be clear, I've never played Xia Legend of the Drift System, so I don't know how it fixes
Well,
it.
there's two things in Xia that make the dice rolling for movement okay. One is you can activate your engine multiple times a turn, depending upon the level engine that's on your ship. So you can activate your engine once, roll a d6, move that many spaces. And if you have another token to activate a part on your ship, you can do it again, thus enabling you to move farther. You can also change what your upgrades do in that game. You don't have to have the D6 engine. You can have the D8 engine if you need to book it faster. And the expansion adds a module that you can attach to your engine that gives you a +2 to your movement rolls, but this modifier cannot exceed the maximum value of the die. So if you get a D6 for your engine and you roll 6, you get a 6. But if you roll a 4, you also get a 6.
There's many ways to modify that roll, so I think it's acceptable.
I just need to play that game.
Speaking Xia Legends of the Drift System, that is a game that welcomes and invites people to house rule it. The designers and playtesters that are on the BGG forums are constantly like, hey, this is how this is supposed to work as designed. But if you don't feel like that works for you, feel free to house rule it or add thematic nonsense to your game. I'm sorry, not nonsense, really good stuff.
Well, wasn't the expansion basically a house rule originally that they incorporated into the game?
Yeah, one of the big pieces of the expansion was the market board, which specifically was introduced to the game to counter a cargo strategy, right? So in the base game alone, you could have 2 planets spawn next to each other. And, planet A could sell a good and planet B could buy that same good. So all you had to do to rack up points was to run cargo runs. And if they were close enough together, that was the most efficient way of making points. So you'd have this really boring game where one person would ship cargo and nobody could catch up with them unless they also shipped cargo. But the market board fixes that. So
it's also, Xia also has a certain amount of push your luck. So that's why it can get, the die roll is kind of important.
I was going to say it's available retail now.
Oh, wow.
I was like, when are they going to do a Kickstarter for me to get again? And it's available retail. I did not know that until this exact very moment. Did you know that, Dan?
By retail, you probably mean through online websites because it's not available through distribution channels.
Probably from their website specifically.
Yeah, probably from their website specifically.
It's available on Amazon. I don't know if it's like a new thing. It just became available.
When the game is in stock, it is available through Amazon because it's Far Off Games that supplies that stock company.
Okay. So they have their own like marketplace on there then.
Yeah, it's direct consumer.
So I guess you can't get it for the store.
Not to my knowledge, no.
He just ruined his day.
I have to give money to big Amazon. Well, I guess it's through the Amazon Marketplace, so it goes straight to them for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part.
So that's not too bad, I guess.
I bought it from their website specifically, and you probably can get it from them still, but it wouldn't be listed on the normal. On the,
you go to their website, it says buy on Amazon.
I would actually be very surprised if there were too many copies of that game left in the wild at this point, given the fact that he is gearing up for his next Kickstarter and is probably focused on that project.
Well, there looks like there's a ton of copies of the base game, but like looking at the expansions, they're saying like 6 left, 3 left, sort of thing. I guess if you don't have Xia Legends of the Drift System, you want to buy it right now for me, send it to me. Send me an email, PM me, I'll give you my address. You can just send it straight to me. It's okay.
See, that's why you all have to come up here and play games out of my library.
Well, Dan has it too.
We can have a board game year.
Yeah, that's true.
And never play the same game twice.
I'll throw Dan and Peter in the back of the van when we go.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
They can watch SpongeBob with my daughters.
No, okay, never mind.
So I know a house rule that you have, James, that you haven't mentioned.
What's that?
When your kids play Dixit, it's fine as long as you don't have to play with them, right?
That's not really the house rule. It is a rule.
It's a life choice.
A life choice. Dixit. No.
I think I've only got one other one that I can think of that I know that I've done, and it's because I've played this game quite a few times, and it's been a little bit since I've talked about it on the podcast, but I've mentioned it before because it was definitely on my list of some of my favorite games, and that's Betrayal at House on the Hill. And with that game including a trader, and the trader having to read a separate rule book when it comes time for the second half of the game to start, I've always had it as a rule that someone who's never played the game before, if it randomly chooses that they're the trader, they don't actually have to be. Like, I'm not going to force a brand new player to be the trader. Now, if they want to, totally cool. But I've definitely played with people who are like, I'm just kind of just learning how to play this game. I'd much rather be able to sit down with all the heroes and read that book together with them to figure out what's going to happen next, especially in a game. And this is me being completely honest about the game, in a game where some of the adventures are very hard to understand what it is they really want you to do. I would hate to put that on somebody, because most of those adventures, you're going to have to house rule something anyways, because of the way that it's written, and it's just hard to understand. So you don't know if it wants you to tell people about a thing, or if you're supposed to keep it a secret. So definitely, since the game randomly assigns the trader, I do not make someone who is new to the game be the trader if they'd rather not. So that's one rule that I definitely house rule for sure.
Yeah, I can see that, because the trader, if there is a trader selected, they have to read a whole new set of rules for the game, and they have questions they can't ask.
That's exactly it. Yeah, they're all by themselves at that point. So it definitely makes more sense for somebody who has kind of seen the way that plays out to then to take that in at that point. So some of them they're easy to understand, but there are definitely some adventures in there that the way that they're written can be very confusing. And if you've got somebody who's even a little unsure about it, then I just let them know, it's totally okay. You don't have to be the trader. Anyone else here would probably be happy to step up and take that role on. I know me, I prefer to be the trader. So it's always fun. So.
Yeah. I don't think we have to worry about if we play, because James is just automatically the trader, right?
Yep. Period.
Yeah. I was going to say, I played one game where the rules were so ambiguous for the trader, because I was the trader, that don't know even if I got them right. But when I was playing, I was like, this seems completely unfair, because they couldn't leave, but there's no way they could defeat me at all. And any way that I read it. So I fudged it, and I was like, you know what? These guys aren't really that tough anymore. They still died, but I was like, there's no way. And it wasn't fun to just go up against like one of the little zombie monster thingies and just be like, okay, you're tanked. There's zero ways you can defeat this thing.
So you tried to give them a fighting chance?
Yeah, I wanted it to be thematic.
I love that.
To have fun.
I think that's great.
So I was like, you know what? We're not, it isn't actually going to be this tough. I didn't actually say anything, but I was like, yeah, you do damage to him. Yep. He's about to die. You just got to finish him off. And there was like, I think half the strength and half the health.
Yeah.
And they still didn't make it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, at least they took a couple of them out. So it was like semi-fun.
There you go.
Right. And that is one of the complaints with the original version of Betrayal, is depending on when that transition happens, when it clicks to, reveal what the game is, and reveal the trader if there is one. If it happens too fast, or it could be just no chance for the non-trader character.
Yeah, that's another like house rule that was definitely taken into account in later versions of the game.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people adopting the haunt rules from Betrayal of Baldur's Gate or the Legacy version for the original Betrayal, and I could definitely see it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that has to get changed, because if you're in the original game, you can start the haunt with the very first haunt roll, and there's no way. There's not enough board to play on at that point. So
I got a house rule for Betrayal on House on the Hill. Put it away and play Mansions of Madness.
You know what? I love Betrayal at House on the Hill, but yeah, play Mansions of Madness. It's a far better game. I'm going to totally agree with you on that one. I love Betrayal. No, I love Betrayal at House on the Hill. I love Betrayal at Baldur's Gate. I think they're incredibly fun thematic games, but Mansions of Madness is a superb game.
So
Yeah.
now that I got Betrayal Legacy and I finally got my copy of Mansions of Madness, I should just never open Betrayal Legacy and just play Mansions of Madness.
I
Oh,
really do wanna
You
play
definitely
Betrayal
play
Legacy.
Betrayal Legacy. It's so good. Betrayal Legacy is so much fun.
Plus, if you don't like it, you can just throw it away when you're done.
It still has its issues. There's definitely a couple errata that you've got to look up online, but it's such a fun game.
Yeah, I definitely really, really want to play Betrayal Legacy. I have not played that one. And I also want to play Pandemic Season 0.
Season 0, right?
I have not played that one yet either.
Yeah. I've never played one of the Pandemic Legacy games. I would like to do that at some point.
Nathan likes Pandemic Legacy Season 2 better. I like Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
Okay.
But either way, you should probably play them in order.
It is very much, I think it's hard to say because the way it plays out is very dependent on how your individual games go. And I think that is actually the core of why I prefer one over the other, is because just the way the game played out. It's like we had tremendous luck early on, and that made it super easy in one game. And then the other one, we had bad luck, and it made it much more of a challenge. But I really do feel like we need to collectively play some sort of campaign game or legacy game together.
We have Charterstone Digital.
True, we got to play that. We'll prove James's previous comments on Charterstone wrong.
I don't know. I'll be all for that because it's a character flaw, but I like exploiting games.
Yes, it is.
I mean, in a way it is, because like the point of the game is for everyone to have fun and be an enjoyable experience. It doesn't actually really matter who wins,
but it does.
But well, now I don't like some of the games where I exploit different things on it. I don't win. I just really enjoy like drilling down in the game.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out like what's the most optimal thing. And it turns out the most optimal thing in Charterstone isn't, which we'll show you when I'll try it again when we play, isn't actually the funnest.
Okay.
It's just doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again forever.
Till somebody kicks you.
If they kick me out, it makes it faster. It's even better. So I get my meeples back. I don't have to recall them. So please do that.
No,
please
he just means kick you. Physically
kick you. Physically
kick me.
With my foot in the back of the head.
In the back of the head.
I have one more example of ways that I have modified a game. 2 were relatively successful and 1 was not so successful. So I have sat down and tried to come up with rules to solo games that didn't have rules for solo rules necessarily. The ones that worked for me was Concordia. I sort of like made my own rule set for solo Concordia and then collaborated with another person, and our combined rule set, I think, is still on BGG somewhere. And then the other one I did on my own was one for Last Will. Last Will, I basically made a bot that you can run with any number of players, really. So you can run it at one player, and the bot will fight you in the contest to lose as much money as possible in that game is the goal. Or you can add it to like a 2 or 3 player game just to add an extra player to the game and to have another person like eating up worker placement spots. The unsuccessful experiment was with 51st State. Now 51st State does have a solo mode that is in the box that is functional, but I wanted something that a little bit more chunky and or capable of a little bit more manipulation to it. I wanted the bot to be able to maybe mimic certain specific factions in the game or be able to use your open production locations, which the current bot doesn't really do. I experimented with a couple things and did come up with something that kind of worked, but was also way too complicated. I had to throw out the window. So
I just got this sad image of you trying to make a solo version of Just One or Telestrations or something like that. But no, I know that's not you. But you could just imagine somebody trying to make a solo party game.
I don't think that'll work. No,
I have nothing to say about that.
Well, I was just going to say, I think what we really want after everyone has listened to this episode is we want you to comment to us on the social medias. What are your favorite house rules for your games? So whether that's on our Twitter page or if it's on the Facebook group or wherever it is that you're interacting with us, let us know, because if it's a game that we like and it's a game that we want to play, we definitely want to try out some of these other house rules, especially if it helps us to beat James.
Maybe somebody's come up with a house rule for Tabletop Gaming Guild podcast, something to play along with while we're talking and see if we say keywords or something.
Yeah. Do they have a Tabletop Gaming Guild bingo card?
Maybe.
Whoever has Eric M. Lang on it's gonna win.
Gonna win every time.
Or Simon.
Or Simon. Or Blood Rage. or
Now I have to
onk.
think of something that I can mention in every episode.
I've been starting to say Carl Chuddick a lot, or at least mention one of his games.
He's pretty good. I played Innovation today too, by the way.
I was gonna say, isn't it someone Fisher?
Alexander Fisher.
There it is. That's yours.
It's one of my
That's your
favorites.
stand. Yeah,
it's one of my favorites.
I find a way to talk about D&D every time. So
Or Blood Rage.
So I'm not sure if we're gonna do that, but now definitely comment on the social medias.
Yes.
We'll get back to you. Definitely want to do an engaging conversation on what your house.
If anybody wants to come up with a bingo card,
yeah, we'll do it. I'll post it and everyone can do the bingo card. Maybe we'll even have a prize. I don't know. Let's see if someone makes one. All right. So thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. If you have any feedback for us, feel free to visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Board Game Geek Guild 2989, or our website at tabletopgamingguild.com. Don't forget to like, follow, and/or subscribe. Tabletop Gaming Guild is a product of Tabletop Gaming Guild LLC. All rights reserved.